Hi friends, this is your boy Dale Happy Knowles, thinking about Emancipation Day, wondering if what it means and why it is so important. Pause, think about it with intentional thought, and consider where we go from here. Stay tuned and hear what Tayte Adderley got to say about how theater emancipates our national mindset, how we define our identity and our destiny. We'll be right back.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles.
Welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. We highlight novel ideas, activities, and people who are doing goals and things that it can stretch our minds, things that are not unique, that are unique to what our normal routine is. And today we have another special guest. And so we would like you to join our sponsors, co-sponsors DomDev Enterprises and Paget Investment, and our friends at Something to Think About, as we journey down this discussion with our guest today. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. And what we imagine, we surely can achieve. So let's change the narrative 242. Welcome, Mr. Tayte Adderley. How are you today?
Hi, good afternoon, Dale. Thank you for having me today, first of all. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you. And I think overall I'm doing well this evening. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you're thinking that you're doing that, because once we think, what we think we can become. So you want to be well, and so you are well. So you said you're well, as a man think it. Right. So Tate, you have a graduate UB. Nice. Is it with the flamingos? And
Mingos, yes.
Yes, yes, and you have some background in public administration, law, criminal justice, some great things there, and but we want to focus on the well, I guess part of that applies, but we want to focus on your theatrical talents, and how you could scope up all of that, and we could use the theater as a tool to cause our mindset to change in the Bahamas to what we want it to be, to what we want our identity to be. You have any experience with that? Working with the theater?
So where do you want me to start? You want me to start from the beginning?
Just what you think is most important to put on the table right now. Yeah, I'm sure your followers would know everything. Yeah.
So I think in this conversation about theater, national dialogue, and emancipation, I think that spaces such as the arts and theater are important in driving that conversation, right? Because theater for me is sort of a way of expressing myself and expressing the ideas and thoughts that I have. And I will say that certain plays that I've seen of Bahamian origin and Bahamian craft, they have some very important ideas that I think we need to talk about as a nation, right? And as how we chart ourselves forward and how we move forward as a nation. So I believe that theater is a great space for that. And I think that it's important that we start within the arts, because expression, identity, culture are some of the driving things that drives forward the Bahamas and conversations of progress, understanding who we are as a people and our identity.
Right. Awesome. Well, emancipation in the Bahamas was back in 1834, some 100 and I think it's 88 years ago, twice as much as what both of us would probably dream that we could live.
Right.
So that's a little bit removed, but we're still feeling it. According to a lot of the young people in particular, and some of the older persons are saying that they still feel somewhat constrained. And so when we look at our history, it is some of the historians tell me that the earliest Africans who were mostly enslaved from our background, our ancestors, would have inhabited the Bahamas back in the 1640s. And they came from Bermuda and England with the Lutheran adventurers. So some 200 years later, then we had this thing called the abolition of slavery, which would have been the 1834, when we were supposed to have been freed, those who were enslaved from that bondage. And so I asked the question today then is, have we actually been freed? Do we feel like we've been freed? Let's put it that way.
Do we feel like we've been freed? So essentially, as Bahamian people.
Yeah, Bahamas. Yeah.
So, and I think that's a larger conversation. Or in this conversation, we have to include stuff like majority rule
Yeah.
and stuff like the road to independence, right? Um, I don't think we have, right? Because there's still many constraints that I think that we face on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes it's essentially difficult to interact with the system that we call the Bahamas, right? But
Okay.
like people often say, I think that this idea of emancipation, liberation, and majority rule, I believe that it's an ongoing project, right? So emancipation for us was the first step to getting to this idea of what we call majority rule independence. But I think in many cases, or in some cases, there's some ways that I think that we can do a lot better in striving for liberation and allowing for what we call to be true freedom. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And so when we look at that, then the young people who I meet with a lot, my sons are in the age of like 28, 25 bracket. So you could position yourself based on that to have an idea of who I meet with a lot. But when we look at it, they always tell me that the older people are holding them like bondsmen, like, like all of the policies and the philosophies and the behavior of the older persons who in authority, whether the bosses to work, the people and the policemen in the blue and so forth. And, all of the people who are in levels of authority, they seem to, the mindset is more of a control versus something else. Is that a clear view of most young people, or is that just my crew?
So I think a number of people feel that way about the older generation in the Bahamas, and that's on many levels. That's one on like a level of intellectualism and a level of like job security and economics and the economy. Um, And so, on the one hand, there are a lot of young Bahamians who feel as though that there are a lot of older Bahamians that hold on to these jobs, especially stuff like government jobs or private sector jobs, that stay in these positions and that they don't do well at stuff such as succession planning and ensuring that in these cases or in many cases that younger persons who are qualified and persons who are still able to participate in the job system or labor market, um, they don't do well at training those persons to take on their place, right? Um, in some cases, some persons believe that they're not ready to retire. In some cases, and I can understand why people feel this way, sometimes they believe that when they're about to retire, they don't have the necessary social security systems to provide for themselves when they retire. And then, in many other cases, some persons just like being on the job or if they're within a powerful position, sometimes they like the power or the status or the access that come with that particular position, right? Um, on the hand of intellectualism, um, I don't know if it's a lot of older people driving these conversations, but maybe it is. But I will say that in some spaces that I frequent, there's definitely an ideological chasm between the two different groups, right? So, in one example, you would have a lot of Bahamians that consider themselves to be conservative or conservative Christians
Okay.
or who believe in this idea of traditionalism when it comes to the Bahamas, right? On the other hand, you would have young persons like myself who think that the Bahamas should be taking a more progressive stance on issues and trying to push ourselves forward. But there's also within that some people I think who are on the fence about what they believe in and what they think should be the national progress. But I will say that there is this dominant conservative narratives that are really taking up the conversations in the minds of many Bahamians. And I think one, they are traditionalists. I think on the other hand, sometimes when it comes to ideas of cultural hegemony, a lot of Bahamians, when I think of this idea of liberalism or progressiveness or leftism, they sort of associate with American ideals, right?
Right, right.
And I think that if we were to ever have a sensible push for progressive ideas, we ourselves as Bahamians and the drivers of that change and the drivers of that conversation necessarily have to define things in our own terms, in our own context, and in our own dialogue. So I would say that there seems to be there is a divide between the old and young when it comes to like job security, the future of the labor market and the economy. And then there's also a chasm or a divide between ideas, philosophy, and
Right,
politics. Yeah.
right. Yeah, well, I know there will always be that divide between the philosophies and politics, just basically because of when people grew up and what was the most dominant things in your life at the most dominant time of your life was is going to be significantly different.
Right.
You know, but one of the things that I think the younger persons might want to consider is that the scientist says in their studies that people are most productive when they are between 60 and 70, well 50 to 60, no, 60 to 70, 50 to 60, and then 40 to 50. Now that's productive. So I think that what that might mean is they might not have the energy, but they might have the wisdom and these different things. And so when you team it up together and collaborate, young and old, then we have a healthy society in terms of performance.
Right.
But we have to find a balance
Right.
somewhere in there so that people feel like they belong and they can contribute and they have value. But I think
Right.
that's what's really missing in that part of the discussion, right?
Yeah. So I will say that there is this idea that, and I don't want to say that I get it because it sounds like I'm seceding to the idea, but there's this idea that young people need to wait their turn or they need
No,
to.
yeah, but that's wrong. Yeah, I didn't wait my turn. I
Yeah.
could tell you that. Right?
And so I understand where the need becomes, where the need may come in to say that you want to mentor people, help them to learn the system and how to change the system if need be. But I think in some cases, that type of thinking is used in a nefarious way, whereas you use that to make people believe that they need to wait and to purposefully hold them back from chasing their dreams and potentially, or maybe sometimes they may fear the person taking their place where they are.
Right,
So I understand that, but I think in some cases people use it in the Pharisee to hold young people back.
right, right. Now, our Constitution is, to me, our number one beacon for our identity.
Mhm.
And part of the Constitution says that do hereby proclaim in solemn praise the establishment of the free and democratic sovereign nation founded on spiritual values and which no man, woman, or child shall ever be slave or bondsman to anyone. And then it goes on some other stuff. So we know that the physical slavery has been abolished. But based on what we already talked about on the divide and the mindset, would it be fair to say that we, in reference to what our Constitution's identity is saying we should be, that we have some major challenges in terms of deficiency, young, old, alike?
Can you repeat that question for me, please? I lost it at the latter end there.
Reference to the Constitution and what it defines as what our mindset or our identity should be. It seems clear to me that we both, young and old, have a void, have a divide between where we should be as a nation, or where we should be striving, and what our mindset actually is in terms of what we just discussed so far. And I was asking you, do you agree with that? Or
So I would say yes, and I think this leads back into the point we were making about conservatism and progressive ideas of young people. Um, of course, well, not of course, it's not the right term to use, but in some cases, I think older Bahamians sometimes themselves, and this is indicative of a conversation I was having with an older lady uh, on Saturday, and I get it, I really do. But in some cases, a lot of Bahamians, they kind of enamor or take pride in the Bahamas of the yesterday, right?
yeah,
So we were talking about the issue of public transportation, and I was making a comment about how the public transportation in Alaska could improve to ensure that Bahamians could have proper and better access to public transportation, and to ensure that when they want to get to their destinations, in most cases they can get there safely and in a proper and good environment.
efficient manner.
Yeah, efficient manner, because right now we are having some challenges with that. And to that point, she responded saying that she appreciated the jitneys because that's our culture, that's our tradition, right? And in many cases, I think where people tend to understand, or they tend to get very appreciative of the
Personal.
past, personal with the past, and they tend to stay in the past in many cases. And when they see aspects of society changing around them, then they have a problem with that, right? Um, but societies always change, right? The society that you lament for, the society that you want to keep in a traditional manner, was not always the case as you lived up during the time that you lived up in the Bahamas in, right?
Right.
And so I need people to understand, or I would like for all the Bahamians to understand that this ideas of traditionalism and trying to appreciate the past and trying to keep culture as it is. My response to that would be that culture evolves, right?
Yeah.
And I think that if your culture hasn't evolved, and if your culture um, still carries issues or ideas and ideals that seem to be very problematic, then for me that's a problem, right?
Right.
That shows that your culture isn't evolving and the people aren't improving and the nation isn't improving itself. Um, and so there is that divide in that sense, but I think that we need to understand that things constantly change and that there's change is basically the only constant of life to me. That's what I think about it. Change, right? Um, and so I think we need to be okay with that, right? We can uh, pay homage and pay salute to the past through cultural museums, cultural exposés, and history.
Right.
But we can appreciate it in that way. But I don't think we should appreciate it in the present and trying to keep things in a traditional and conservative manner on how national development works.
Yeah. But I think part of the challenge is because you probably would see it from everybody top down, and meaning everybody's older than you, on the most part. But for me, I'm kind of in the middle. There's a lot of older people with me, and there's a lot of younger people with me. So I somewhat get to see perspectives from multiple points of view. But when we look at that whole process, one thing that I've learned over the years is this: that people tend to gravitate to what made them most happy. And so if some of the older persons preferred what was happening in the past, all that is telling me is that the progress that we are making, or the direction that we are trending, is not more favorable than what it was in the past. Why they would want to like that past more than they like now. So for creatives like yourself, in the generations of creativity, I would say try to steer what we're going into more in a positive direction than some of the negative things that we seem to experience a lot. Now, I know that the media and everybody blows everything out of proportion because they only focus on one side of the pendulum, the negative, sex, etc., because all those things sells, whereas good issues. But that's why we have theater, right? And we have to tell the nice stories to cause you to snuggle up in the corner and dream and whatever else and all that kind of stuff, have your popcorn, right? But so I only say that to say, these are things that we have to work with. And so when we look at this whole idea of emancipating ourselves, right? Because, I mean, Marcus Garvey, those have this song with Bob Marley made famous with Emancipate Yourself from Mental Slavery, blah, 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 etc. So how does the youth see that, though, emancipating? Do they see that there's a need for them to be emancipated, or is only the old people who needs to be emancipated?
So I want to make 2 points. Is it okay if I refer to something that you said earlier?
Sure, man. Yeah, man. This is a
Okay,
discussion. You take it where we gotta go.
thank you for that. I like the point that you made about how we can influence things through media and through culture and the arts. Someone that I pay attention to sometimes, his name is Antonio Gramsci. He talks about how, in many cases, when it comes to thinking about not national development, but more so ideas of revolution and ideas of change, you have to fight in the realm of ideology and cultural hegemony, right? And I think that when it comes to this idea of change, I think persons often sometimes underestimate the power of persons within the media. And that could be mass media, the news, stuff like that. And then also in culture, in the arts, right? And thinking on the idea of basic superstructure, right? We live in a capitalist mode of production, and that capitalist mode of production is maintained through media, through culture, through the church, and through different groups that feed into this idea of normalizing society that we live in, right? And I think that if we look at it from that way, from the basic superstructure, we can understand that we can influence people through the arts, right? So I remember one year, I think before the pandemic hit, there were 2 great plays that I saw in Short Tales. Short Tales is like I think a 2-hour play of about like 10 short plays, right? And one of the plays basically, 2 of the plays talks about the idea of citizenship and the plight that Haitians face in the country, right? Now, I understand that is a stark point for Bahamians to understand, but I'm using that as a point to say that through theater, through culture, through art, we can help to influence ideas and help people to think about things from a different manner, right?
Right.
And one of those plays, it looks at it was about I think it was about 2 vampires, right? 2 Bahamian vampires, and they didn't want they didn't want to suck the guy's blood because he was a Haitian, right? And they felt as though that because he was a Haitian, that there was something wrong with his blood. I don't remember the play's name, but from that point, we were able to understand ideas of discrimination, prejudice, and how we treat these people within our own nation, right? From that fiction point of view, and thinking it from the point of view like a vampire, right?
Right.
And so I think it would be harness some more of these ideas, and if we convey these stories in unique and creative ways, and there's an underlying message towards that, and everything has an underlying message, in my opinion. I think that we could sort of use stories, use theater, use the arts as a turning point to push national dialogue, something that's more progressive, right? You also made another point. I don't know if you can repeat that question for me, please. The
No,
last question.
you asked the wrong person to ask the repeat question because my memory dead short. But I mean, it was basically to say in terms of using the Constitution as our reference, and where it paints that we should have our mindset as to how we develop ourselves for our identity and everything else. Where do we see ourselves compared to that? The young and the old, and are we far off from where we sit, from where we ought to sit? Yeah.
That's a good question. And sometimes I find it difficult to pinpoint what is this idea of a national mindset, right?
Okay.
And I don't know if I can, right? I mean, we can say that there's a lot of people who are traditionalists and a lot of people who feed into ideas of conservatism and want to keep things the same way, right? But at the same time, when we talk about certain issues, stuff such as when we look at the legalization of marijuana, right? Something that you want to keep it illegal, you would think that as a conservative standpoint. But I've seen a number of Bahamians support that position of legalizing the plant, right?
Right.
So I don't know if I fully agree with the standpoint in many cases that this idea of our mindset is one mass of traditionalism and conservatism, but I think it's kind of a bit gray, right? And grayer in some areas, and white in some areas, and black in some areas, right? But I think overall, we sway more conservative, slightly, in my opinion. But I think on some issues, if we were to frame them in the correct way and ask Bahamians what are their ideas on it, we may be surprised, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I think we could do that through theater too. I mean,
Yeah.
the arts, because I mean, we follow a lot of the visual arts and the paintings and stuff like that, and go into exhibitions and just sit there and listen to people talk about it and eavesdrop on people's conversations. Sometimes I wonder how they get to be talking about what they're saying, because I don't see what they be saying, but that's a different kettle of fish altogether. But
It's all
for
abstract.
reference, huh?
It's sometimes, in some cases, very abstract.
Yes,
I'll just leave it at that.
but I wonder what their dreams are like. But anyway, the mindset though, I mean, everybody has a mindset. And so as a collective, the nation have to have a mindset. And just like on an individual basis, the way I see it is we have things that pull us left and right and center and stuff all the time going on in our head, but the way our brain works, we formulate it all together, and whatever is the most dominant is what takes charge. And I'm thinking that the national mindset would be the same. So some would be this way, some would be to the left, some would be upstairs, some would be downstairs. But whatever comes together, whatever's the most dominant would be the mindset of the day. Now, whether that's the mindset that the Constitution spoke to or what we want it to be, is something to be found. But we'll continue on, and then we'll see if we get to a point where we can tackle that. So there was a question just now on the screen that I was gonna no, okay, Madam Producer. So when we look at this whole picture, then what would you say are the three pressing things that is on the minds of the youth that we might need to change?
Oh boy, don't get me started.
That's too bad.
Sorry. So, three pressing things for me. So I will say, sorry.
Pick one then. Yeah.
No. There's a lot to think about. Right? I think one of the things that a lot of people are concerned with is their future. That's one of the things that, for me, and the conversations that I've had with other people, what is their future? And in some cases, or a number of cases, I think some of them believe that, or some of them don't think their future is in the Bahamas, right?
Right.
So for me, in my head, there's this nagging thought that I don't know if this country will exist within the next 50 years because of problems of climate change, and whether we will face issues with the debt, we face fiscal issues, financial issues.
Right.
And so, as a young person, for me and other persons, my future is at the forefront of my head, right? Or forefront of my future. So I'm thinking about what I want to do as I try to go for my master's, right? Or what is going to be my next job? Where do I want to live? Can I live in the Bahamas if I ever decide to come back after I'm done with obtaining my master's, right?
Right.
So I think a lot of young Bahamians are trying to understand where they fit into this society. And for me, I grew up in Freeport, right? I
Right.
obtained my bachelor's and associates from the University of the Bahamas. But during that process, when I first came to Nassau, I had to see why I was fitting it into this city, right? And it wasn't easy, but I had the support systems and friends that I had met along the way that really helped me a lot, especially people like Replay and Shakespeare and Paradise, right?
Right.
And so I think our futures, the economy, and our economic prospects, or economic other stuff, sorry, is at the forefront of our minds. Um, and then I think in some other spaces that may be a bit more progressive, right? I think there's a want and a need for the advances of human rights for all people in the Bahamas, right?
Okay.
Some groups feel as though they're marginalized in national dialogue. Some groups feel like they're neglected. Um, and there are a lot of young people in the Bahamas that are within these groups, right? And they feel as though that they're not getting the necessary resources. They feel as though they live in a society that is very prejudiced against them and that stigmatizes them. And they want to bring about a country whereas they can essentially see themselves in it and be respected, and they feel as though that they can live in a society where they are free from violence, no matter their creed, no matter their what they believe in,
Right.
their gender, or age, or whatever they are, right? And so I think the idea of furthering human rights and trying to protect citizens to provide the necessary what is the word, protections for vulnerable groups. I think that's another thing that we care about a lot as younger Bahamians. The
Right.
third one, I think those are probably my main two that I can really
Right.
think of at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so Pastor Josh McDowell says that rules without relationship leads to rebellion. And so, from what I'm hearing you say, if we are living in a society where the youth have a mindset and the elders have a mindset, and then people in the middle like me might have a mixed mindset. We might be the conks out all confused, but the when we look at those differences, and if if the if the two don't see that anything is making headway with them, then it might lead to rebellion. Do you see that as part of the future as to where we're trending in terms of in order to cause the status quo to change to what we needed to change to in order to advance the country again in leaps and bounds like what would have happened in the early 70s, late 80s?
So that is a very good question, Dale. Uh, and my response to that is very mixed, right? Um, because in some cases, persons like myself, you know, I could ask myself, why fight? Just leave the country, right?
Right.
Just contribute to the brain drain. Just leave. There's no need to fight in order to increase or have a better chance at economic prospects, right? So I think there are a number of people that feel that way, right? And sometimes that's mainly because they believe that political actors or state actors or the political class just doesn't care about them, and the political class or the political people, they only care about their particular goals, and their want to do whatever they want or do whatever they feel in that position of power, right? So I think a number of us are just saying to ourselves, I'm not fighting, I'm just leaving, right?
Right.
Because I think they believe that it's kind of pointless and it's a waste. And maybe in some cases they agree that the payoffs to that, or the potential risk to that may be too risky, like going to jail and getting lost
Right.
in the system and waiting 5 years for your case to be decided upon, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't I don't know if it'll come to that point of rebellion. We live in a globalized world, and I don't want to say it's easy to cross borders,
Right.
but
Right.
persons like myself who are seeking education, I think there's a way out for me to get out the country,
Yeah.
and look for prospects other places. Um, and then in many cases, persons just go with it.
Yeah.
And so, despite me or you trying to change the country and or at least provide the spark to bring about that change, we have coping mechanisms, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I think that is one of the reasons as to why we have a lot of issues with mental health, a lot of issues with drug abuse, alcoholism, because in many cases, these are the ways that people cope with
Right.
the problems that they face in an everyday Bahamas, right? And so people cope, people can just leave, uh, but I don't know if we'll ever reach to the point of rebellion. I think we're very, I don't know if docile is the right word to use.
Okay. That's a good one to use, though.
I think we're very docile in some cases. Yeah. Yeah.
Passive, but
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe for things that we want to be, because things that we're really passionate about, no, we're very aggressive, we're very energetic, and we have the Clay Curry assassination mindset. Even though you might look calm, cool, collective, meek, and mild, and whatever, we doing you in whilst we doing. So I mean, that's just. I mean, we're very hospitable people, so we naturally want to be productive. And the way I look at that is people tend to have a lot of these vices when you're unproductive or not as productive as you know that you can be, right? But when I look at my situation, when I came home from school, I didn't have to come home from school. I mean, I had a number of offers that would have kept me overseas. But you know, it was during the era where the Penn administration was promoting building new country and blah 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 and all that kind of stuff. And so I would say this to that all of those who question, who have talents, who question whether they should come home or not. There's two things to that. One, I would always say, if there's no access to certain things right now, go build yourself up and come back and start your own business, right? With your own credibility. If you have access to something that's already in play, then I would say get into it and build from within. Because I came back and I built from within, and I would say, not boasting or anything, but just about every technological thing that you could think of that my fingerprints has been on over the last 30 years, 40 years. Even though I've been out of the industry somewhat for the last 10 years, there still hasn't been anything major since. And so all of these things that you're using today that you all take for granted, we didn't have that. We had things like ring down circuits, 3-digit dialing. You know, now we're at 10, some older. So, I mean, we had massive progress and development, but it comes with a price and an effort and a sacrifice to do it. I find sometimes the young people don't want to go that route. They want it to be like digital, on or off. There's no analog in between, long ramp up and ramp down. We want it now, yes. And so before we take a little break here, we have Miss Helen Bartlett, and my screen writing is gone so small. But it says, how would you, is that record? Bridging this, yeah, you wait, I gotta change my screen so I could see the writing, please. Sorry
So,
about that.
H. Bartlett Hannah asks, how would you recommend bridging this ideological divide to bring awareness of the need for trained youth to assume critical roles? Are there government apprenticeship programs to facilitate this transition? Good question.
Yeah.
So, I think in this, I'm going to put on my public policy hat here with my public administration degree, right? I think that in anything, the first thing that we need to do is understand essentially what is driving this ideological divide, right? So between the young and old, the young people want to enter the workforce. The young people want to improve their economic prospects. The young people, they want to have a good life, as something that they said that they should go towards when they were growing up, right?
Yep.
And I think that
Promise.
older people, they want to maintain their lifestyles. Sometimes older persons want to be assured the security or social security nets that they would have coming out of the public service or the private sector. And they want to be able to maintain their lifestyle and live a sensible life and a good life when what is it? A good life when retiring or go transitioning out of the workforce, right? Um, and I think that what we need to do first of all is to ensure that our social security net system is working properly. So stuff like NIB,
Right.
and that when they retire, they can have the necessary benefits they need to sustain themselves, right? As it is a driving motivating factor for a lot of persons when they're phasing out of the workforce, right? Um, and so also, I think that we need to instill in ourselves this idea or the value of succession planning, right? Understand that you will not always be here, right? And to sort of switch into more of a collectivist and from a individualistic to collectivist understanding of ideas of public service and to bring about the betterment of the nation and the betterment of the people, right? And I think within that, we have to go towards improving our ranking or uh, best best practices understanding of succession planning, right?
Right.
So if we instill these values in the people, right, we would understand to ourselves that it is not about us. It is about progressing the nation and trying to bring about this common loftier goal, right, in the Bahamas, right? And I think that we have let a lot of individualistic ideals crept into our national dialogue. We meant to think back to this collectivist understanding that we are all here, we are all Bahamians, we are all trying to strive towards a common loftier goal. And
Right.
so instilling values such as collectivism and communalism and becoming together as a people, as the black in our flag, right? We have to instill those values to help people understand why succession planning is important. Because, like I said, it is not about you, it is about the service that you provide to people and how we can make the country a better place, right? And I think for younger people, they should be instill those values as well so that they don't make the mistakes that many older Bahamians are making now. Um, to have them understand that you are serving Bahamian people and you are bringing about the betterment of the nation. And so I'm not sure if there are government apprenticeship programs to facilitate this transition, but I do know, I think when the IDB did, Inter-American Development Bank did a study on the public sector in the Bahamas, I think that we did have very, very much so have some challenges with succession planning in the public sector and trying to make sure that we could facilitate those transitioning out and making sure that persons are there to fill these roles and to continue the betterment of the public service. So to that would be asked. That would like be my answer to that question. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that we seem to mix up in the public sector, at least I think we mix up in the public sector, is that we seem to think the public sector is just grossly overstaffed and that's why it doesn't function. But really and truly, the way I see it is that it, it, it lacks efficiency because a lot of those people could be doing something else in the sector because we still are we're only 50 years and we still have a big space to go into, but we sort of our mindset as to how we approach it, which is why I like to talk about the mindset. This is not as productive as it could be, and so forth. And so something like what Ms. Bartlett Hannah asks is what we can also have developed in our system so that we could have more maybe it'd be from a public-private point of view, to have these more systems. But you have stuff like the Governor General's youth thing and Judson Enos programs and stuff like that that help in building people. But I mean, I think she's talking about something at more grand level. So she also asks, as excellent, I hope that sufficient people of influence share your mindset. Well, the key for that is keep talking. The more of us talk like this, then the more we can influence those people who have the power of the pen. And the power of the pen will do what the people want because they want votes. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and that's the fact of the matter of it, right? I think that a lot of Bahamians kind of underestimate that. And I look at, although nothing, unfortunately, substantial has come from it as yet, I look at the Freedom of Information Act. It has its problems now, but it was enacted and people understand the importance of it because we talked about it, right? And going back to my point with Gramsci, talking about how we should strive for changing the mindset of people and understanding why change is important. Then, through that mindset, through that hegemony of thought and that ideological shift, we can influence the politicians, the policymakers, the people that are in charge. Because why? They work for us. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll forego the break, looking at the time and knowing everybody's schedule this evening. So let's look at the actual theater, though, as a tool. If I made you the czar of culture today, and we want to focus on theater this year, leading from this 40th, 49th anniversary up to the 50th anniversary, and we need to put together some programs, whether it's public relations, but mainly in the theater. How or what would you script? Well, first, I guess I need to ask, what was your strength in theater? But what would you want to script in theater in order to be used to encourage? I wouldn't say influence. Encourage people to think in a different light.
So, you mean script as in write as a playwright?
Yeah. Well, I mean the whole package of what is happening in the theater today. What does the theater is? We talked about the doneness a little bit before we
Right.
joined, right? Okay, and the challenges they haven't since COVID. Is the theater space up to par as a whole? Not just the doneness, but for what creatives we have in the country and out the country in the 242, do we have what we need to be our best? And are we getting as creative as we can in that space to forge the mindset of where our culture should go? But I'm a strong believer that it's those things other than the home that really forges how people think.
So there is a lot more that we can do as a sector, right? And you were talking about my strengths as a theater professional. I came into this as someone that assisted with stuff such as fundraising and helping with the capacity of the Shakespeare in Paradise Festival, right?
Right.
I was a festival assistant. And also helping alongside with some production stuff such as sound and other things. I think in 2019, right?
Right.
So the truth of the matter is, I think we have some challenges that we are facing as a sector, and I think that a lot of persons, there are a lot of people that want to do this, right? I remember prior to the pandemic, there were a lot of persons that were coming out and wanting to audition for plays that were in Shakespeare in Paradise and other stuff that bring play the dance was having on during the repertory season, right? There are people out there that are interested in these things, right? However, we sometimes have a challenge with reaching them, right? And in many cases, some persons sometimes have challenges with seeing that, this particular space is a viable career
Right.
career track, seeing how this could be somewhat as a starting grounds of becoming international or doing more outside of the Bahamas. So there are a lot
Right.
of people that have challenges seeing those opportunities, but they are there, right? We have to find them. We have to provide the resources for people to find them, right? There are a lot of burgeoning, not just actors, but a lot of upcoming directors and upcoming writers that write very great pieces, as such that I've seen in Shakespeare in Paradise, short tales, and other plays that would have been put on by Rinkley over the years. However, there are a lot of people that want to be in the creative space, in the theater space, but sometimes they lack the access to
Right. Yeah.
coming to theater. I remember one time I was at a dentist during the summer, and somebody told me who came to deliver something they didn't even know the dentist existed, right? Um, so I think if I were the culture czar, as you say, I think one of the most important things, first of all, is to always provide access uh, and to provide infrastructure for industries, right? So a thing that is important on the radar right now for anyone that is within culture and within the arts is the repairs that needs to be done at the Dundas, because the Dundas is kind to the Bahamian people, right? And other theatrical spaces or stages that need repairing and that need necessary infrastructure to
Right.
keep on going and to keep on operating, right? Infrastructure is one of the most important things in any sector in any industry,
Right.
right? And then I think what's next is helping people to understand that, most importantly, when it comes to these sectors, that these are viable options in the creative space in order to make some change, make a living, and also even become sort of a platform to pivot into other areas that they may be interested in. Help people understand that that is the case and there are opportunities here.
Right.
Help people see that, right? And then another policy option or idea is to nudge people into these places, right? Provide incentives
Right.
for persons who operate in the sector to help the sector grow. Maybe tax breaks, VAT breaks, stuff like that. So there's many things that we can do, and even going down to grants and scholarships. One of the things that I liked about the Bahamas Development Bank was their technological grant that they provided to creatives in the Bahamas, right? And I think they gave us some MacBook Pros to a bunch of Bahamian creatives
Okay.
in the art space and in the culture space. So there are many things that we can do, and I think in order to further and help professionalize the industry and to ensure that the industry can work and it can be a viable industry for Bahamians. And I think in a larger conversation of national development and national growth, what we need to see or provide people with is other opportunities and other avenues of finding a job or finding a career path or
Right.
pursuing their passions, right? So if I were the culture czar, I would focus on infrastructure, accessibility, incentives, scholarships, and grants for people within the sector.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So we well along the way now, because now we got this big foundation set up on, the 2% of the billionaires live in Albany, so they eager to throw some of their money into a foundation for us to do something.
Yeah.
And so Brandon Sanderson, sorry, the Way of the Kings. He says that the purpose of storytelling is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think upon. And I found that interesting because in the Bahamas, we're not short of storytellers. We might have people who might not be formal storytellers, but when you go sit on the blocks and go in the bar or sports club or wherever there's a hairdresser, I guess it's the same thing. I don't go in the hairdresser, but some places, I'm sure that there's a gang of stories being told, and so it might just need some assistance in helping with that. But when we look at our Bahamas identity seemed to be a little bit undeveloped. We like the 242, we have Junkanu, but we create small busts of national heroes, but then we applaud these massive statues of previous rulers. Of the theater should have an identity. We have places like the old school shows of Summer Madness and You Can Lead a Horse to Water and all. So I'm just thinking that theater can be, these are things that I remember, right? And so if I can remember this long, that theater has a serious impact on persons, and we could develop the theater over the next year to really drive our mindset. I don't know if any of that resonate with what you're thinking is.
So I agree. Theater can be a drive for the national mindset. Definitely. I remember reading You Can Lead a Horse to Water. I think it was back in 2019. And it was a great play. Amazing. I loved it. Right. And it made me think about our history as a nation and, where we came from, and some tragedies that we would have faced in the Bahamas. Another great play that I enjoyed that I read in an English class back at UB was Diary of Souls by Ian
Okay, I
Strachan.
heard about that one.
Ian Strachan. Beautiful play. It was about the incident with the HMBS Yellow Welder, and the incident where those Haitians died, and coincidentally that happened like I think last week or the week before last, with the capsizing of the
Flipped
particular.
over, right?
Yes. Um, and so that play, Diary of Souls, is very important for me because it made me question how we treated Haitian people.
Right.
And then that goes into a larger conversation of how we treat marginalized people in the country. But back to that, I will say that if it's done correctly, if a script is done well, right, and it conveys ideas and a message that is pertinent to the national society, right. One of the things that I would like to see um, in the culture space and in the intellectual space, because those two intersect on heavy levels, right, is a very balanced understanding of where we are as a nation, right? Very um, fair and objective isn't a real thing in many cases, but I will say objective here, right? A very objective understanding of where we are as a country. Um, and it helps us to understand what are our faults, what problems we faced, what issues we've had in the political arena, in the economic arena, in the social arena, um, and where we've succeeded in policy decisions. Right. I want to see. I want to see pieces and literature and cultural pieces that reflect that. That is
Right.
honest about where we are as a nation, and I think that's something that I would like to see in the space of national arts within the coming year or so. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. So tell me, do we have any art programs other than the painting and so forth in UB?
So performing arts,
Performing arts, yeah.
yes, performing arts at UB, I think they are in the process of trying to formalize a degree. But I do know that there are classes that are provided at the university. So some classes I think have been done by Nicolette Bethel, Nico.
Okay.
So I think also the director of culture, Marina Bethel, she has done an acting class at UB.
Okay.
So they're there, and then there's also a UB theater club that I was a part of, and that was started by that was established by Dr. Craig Smith
Okay.
at the English department. So there are courses and facilities to have that type of expression in the arts. I also think that they're trying to develop a degree for performing arts at the
For
university.
them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All right. So Helen Bandon says again, they say, are there any performing arts programs within the school system? I guess she means the high school system.
So I know that some, I don't want to use that word, but some like places like I think St. Andrews, I think they have some of the performing arts program,
Or
like
the elite
places like St.
schools.
Andrews. Elite schools, yes. Okay.
Elite in terms of money, right?
Yeah,
That's
elite
what
in
I
terms of
mean.
money. Fair, fair.
Money,
Okay,
yeah.
fair, fair.
Because
And I
even the
think,
QC ain't nothing more elite than QC. Yeah.
oh God, I'm not even going to get the conversation. But I know that some schools have that program, but whether it's standardized within like the public schools, I don't think so. But I
Right.
know that for us in particular, Shakespeare in Paradise, we have a program where we invite a lot of school students to come to the Madness performances and enjoy the plays. So some schools have these programs. Public schools, I'm not exactly sure if it's a formalized thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Last one for me would be what advice would you give to high school, university, and novice graduates seeking to make a mark in theater?
That is a good question. Um, One thing I will say is in that question, you have to know what you're good at, right?
Okay.
Not everyone is going to be a good actor. Not everyone is going to
That's
be a
for sure.
director. Not everyone is going to be a great writer.
Who's a
But
good standing?
and so if you have some certain type of skill and you can bring into the theater industry, especially like Greenplay and Shakespeare in Paradise, we welcome you. We have volunteers every year during the Shakespeare in Paradise Festival. Um, and then also what I would say is that if you aspire to something, I don't want to limit you and say that if you ain't good at writing, you ain't good at writing,
Right.
just do that. But if you want to do it and if you're passionate about it, you can learn the necessary tools and join the necessary workshops to take part in these processes, right? So I would say that is we need the personnel, we need the people, we need the human resources in the sector, right? We need people, and we're not gonna skirt you away or shun you away. We need you, right, in the
Right.
sector necessary. And so come with your skills. If you want to act, go act. If you want to write, go write. If you want to direct, go direct, right? If you want to do production stuff, um, you could do the sounds, you could do the lights, you could help with like recording and capturing for archiving purposes. Or if you want to do like marketing, help us market our players. If you want to focus on development, help us write grants and help us fundraise for theater. There's many things and there's many occupations you can take up in this sector.
Right.
Um, but just come. It's gonna be a fun space. It's a unique space. It's a progressive space, and we don't judge anybody. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, is there anything would you like to say to the general public out there? Because I've asked you a million and one questions.
I will say this, and I think this goes back to the question that was asked by the bottle handler lady. That may be a lady. I don't know if they
Yeah,
are.
it's a lady.
Okay, okay, the bottle handler lady. Um, I think that one thing that we have to do, yes, is bring together the ideological divide, right? And we have to come together as a nation and build a consensus and to understand where do we want to go as a nation for the next 25 years or 50 years if we
Right.
have that much time, right?
Yeah, we got that time. We can figure it out.
We can figure it out, I guess, right? So we need to come together. We need to understand. We need to plan. We need to develop, and we need to understand where do we want to go within the next 50 years and decide that and build consensus and agree to what the Bahamas should look like in the next 50 years. So that would be that for me.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Sound you got a good job coming up for you, because we got to do this together. Put all hats on the table, and
Right.
let's mix it up together and come out with great solutions. That's the
Right.
way, to me, the way the world is today.
Right.
No one has all of the answers, and we try to encourage people to come on the show so that they could share their views, and we put it all together, and hopefully at the end of the day, we have some great guava duff on the table to eat.
Yes.
Yeah,
Agreed.
yeah, yeah.
Agreed, Dale.
Yes, but thank you kindly for sharing with us this evening. It's been really great and enlightening. It's refreshing. We'll have to have you come back so we could drill deeper into maybe one area, for it is a whole broad brush topic. And because I mean, we need more conversation, particularly with the youth and for the youth, so that we could drive
Right. I agree.
a view
I agree.
to help expand everything. Yeah. So thank you again,
Agreed.
Madam Producer.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you, and everybody out there on social media. We'll be back the same time, same place, looking same way. Next week, more exciting topics as we go. Blessings.
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative 242